Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this next video lesson. What I want to do is to introduce how nested loops work in Visual Basic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a program that has me list the number of rows and the number of columns, and maybe what we'll do is we'll just we'll display asterisks, right, or stars, based on the number of rows and columns that the user wants. And of course, we're going to only have a maximum number, so I'll determine what that is in just a moment. So I've created this form, the names of the various properties. So over here we have txt num of rows, txt num of columns, btn submit. For this label, LBL result. Notice that for the label I've changed the font property to Courier New 12-point bold. So if I were to open this up, I selected 10 or 12 points over here. I turned the bold attribute to true. I changed it, and then also select my font style and also size that I want for the font. And so this is what we have right now. Okay, by the way, let me see what this looks like here. If I were to type in a text, this is just an experiment, you don't have to do this, but if I type in 1, 2, 3, actually I said I was going to use stars, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Let's see what 10. Okay, so do I have 10 over here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's with spaces, but I really don't need spaces. I can display this without spaces. So let's say that 20 is the max that a user can enter for any row and any column. In fact, you know what? I'm feeling a little nervous here. I'm not thinking that this is tall enough, so I'm going to make this taller. By the way, what is this width? So in terms of the size, it looks like the width is 292. Ah, look at that. The height is 325. So I think I'm going to make this the same by just simply double-clicking on this, 392. That looks better. So the size in pixels, the width is 392, the height is 392. And I'll just open up the form just a little bit. It looks a little bit more square. We'll limit the user to 20 over here and 20 over here. So if they enter a larger number, maybe we could display a message box or something like that. That'll let the user know that they can't do that. Okay, let me click Save All, and let's double click on the button. And of course, we're going to start off with our comments, declarations, get user input, calculation, and finally output. Turn the properties panel off. Okay, well, in the declaration section, the first thing you're supposed to ask yourself, what is it that the user needs to give to me? What do I need to give back to the user? So I go back over here. The user needs to give me the number of rows and the number of columns. Okay, so dim num of rows as integer, dim num of columns as integer. All right. Since we are dealing with displaying stars, a certain number of row and column of stars, I need you to think about numbers in a circle. So that means we're going to need a counter for the number of rows and a counter for the number of columns. So dim counter rows as integer, dim counter columns as integer. That way in my looping structure, I'll have one counter for the rows, one counter for the columns. Think about a slot car track. You're going to play slot cars, and you have this big loop, but inside the track you have a smaller inner loop that you go several times, and then you go back to the big loop. That's what we're doing. That's called the nested loop, where we have something out, and then we come in a couple times, and then we go back out again. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do, and let's see here. It looks like I'm going to have to give the user some sort of an output. So why don't I create a string that will finally contain what that output's supposed to look like. So we'll say dim output as string, and I'll set that to nothing at first. Okay, I may not have all of my variables that I need, but I'll start off with this, and then if I need more, I can just simply add them. Okay. So the next thing to do is to get the user input. So let's get this information, and we're going to put that into num of rows. That's going to be convert dot to int 32. whatever is inside of that text box. And see, I like to just type in the TXT right now. I don't like to continue typing everything else because I'm a fast typist and I make tons of mistakes. So I can just simply select which one I want, which is this guy down here, number of rows. And then don't forget the dot text. We're going to do the same thing for num of columns. Convert dot to int 32 txt, and then of course number of columns dot text. Okay, so now that we've obtained the user input, let's limit what the user can do in terms of the values that they can enter. So if you want to limit, then use the if statement. If your number is greater than 0 and if it's less than or equal to 20, something like that, right? Then you're permitted to go. All right, so let's do this. Let's say if num of rows is greater than 0 and, so I'll put the word and here, if num of rows is less than or equal to 20, then enter. So see, I'm establishing a criteria. Let me put a note over here, or a comment. Make sure the user has entered a value in the range 0 to 20. That's what we're trying to do for both the rows and the column. For both the row and column values. Something like that. So this section is going to make sure they've entered it in the correct range. If number of rows is greater than 0, and if number of rows is less than or equal to 20, then then we're all set, right? But I don't want to check to see if they've entered something correctly. I want to check to see if they've entered something incorrectly. So maybe what I should have done is this. If number of rows is less than or equal to 0, and if number of rows is greater than 20. See, that's the part that they did wrong. They entered a number less than 0, or they entered a number greater than 20. See, 20 is okay, and any number in between from 1 to 20 is okay. So do you see how I switched that around? And now I can check if they've done something wrong. Let's display some sort of a message box. Oh, you're right. That's the question rather is, should that be or? You're right. It shouldn't be and, because it'll never be and. Nice catch. Very good. Yeah, you're right. It's supposed to be or if this is the case, or is this is the case. Yeah, very good. Nice catch. So if that's the case, we're going to show a message box dot show, and then within the parens, I get to fill in all of the parameters. Okay. Notice that I have 21 different flavors of message box show. You do not have to click this little triangle or this little triangle to go through these. It's not like a setting. What this is like a recipe book. It's showing you all of the different ways that you can arrange this show. And one of the ways that we can arrange it is we can have a text, we can have a caption, we can have a button, but we can also have an icon. So let me see if I can find that one. Let's see here. So it looks like, no, that's not the one that I want. I think this is it. Yeah, this is it. We have a text. We have a caption. This is the message. This is the title. This is some sort of a message box. And this is the icon, like the hand or the exclamation mark or an X or a check mark, say, for example. Again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to click through these. I just like to go through these to make sure that I'm looking for the correct version that I want. And I want this one right here. So the message that I'm going to have is, quote, out of range, or number. How about this? I'm sorry. Type a number from 1 to 20, because that's what the issue is. And close quote. And then the next thing I'm going to have is the actual title or the caption, and we'll say out of range for the caption. And let's see here, comma. And this was going to be version 7, which is this guy right here, the message box buttons. So message box buttons dot. All right, what kind of message box button do I want? I think I just want the OK button. I just want the user to see an OK button. When they click that, then they are acknowledging that an error has occurred or some sort of a range error has occurred. So I'll double click on OK, comma, and so now I want a message box icon. So message box icon dot. All right, I have all kinds of different options. Do I want the hand or stop or information, exclamation mark, error, so forth and so on. Pick whatever one you want. I'll say error, this guy right here. And then go outside of the parens and then press enter. This message box will display. Now, I don't want the user to continue with the program that I'm going to type in just a moment. I don't want them to continue. So I'll just say exit sub. So this will go all the way to the end and it won't execute anything. And that's what I want because the user didn't enter a correct value. Why don't we do this? Let's help the user out. Whatever they typed into the text box, let's erase it for them because it was an erroneous error. So it was an erroneous error. It was an out of bounds error or an out of range error. So what I'll do is I'll just simply say txt num of rows dot text, and I'll just simply set that to quote close quote. I can get rid of this extra space right here. So I have this. If you do not type a value inside of the range, then you're going to get a message box, a text box. The text box will clear, and then we'll exit the sub. Let me run the program just to see what happens. We're not done, of course. But I'd like to see what happens if I enter an incorrect value. So here we go. We go to number of rows and type in 88. Let's see what happened here. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay. What I tried to do is to actually, let me see here. Text columns. Oh, I left it blank. Sorry about that. Let me stop this. Run the program. I'll have to use a try block for that. 88, and I left this blank. I can't do that. All right, type a number from 1 to 20 out of range. Here's my error icon. So everything that I've created over here is listed here. When I click OK, this thing should blank. Yep, it did. And so now I get a chance to try it again. All right, let me stop the program. We need to do the same thing for the column. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this code, copy, paste, and we'll do this for number of columns. So num of columns. Let me copy and paste that, put that here. Type a number from 1 to 20 out of range. Okay, and then txt num of columns is the one that I want to change. So in other words, we're using the same code, but we're now referring to the columns. So change this to num of columns. Change this to txt num of columns. We want the user to enter a value from 1 to 20. Okay. Now, another thing that we need to consider back over here in the get user input is the user could enter something incorrectly, or they could just leave it blank. Well, this is a great time to use a try block. So what we'll do is over here, we'll type in the word try. Where it says get user input, we're going to type in the word try. And then it creates this try block. Now what I'm going to do is put these items that we're trying to obtain from the user inside of try. So copy and paste those and put them inside of the try block. And the reason why we're doing that is the user could enter incorrect or inappropriate data, such as spacebar, a letter, a symbol. We can't convert those things into an integer. See, if they typed in the letter A, what does A convert to integer? Can't do that. So what we want to do is we want to make sure they're typing in numbers. If they did not type in a number, let's, in the catch area, display a message box letting them know invalid input, type a number. So let's go ahead and do something like that. So we'll say message box. In fact, why don't I just copy and paste? I'll just copy and paste this guy over here, because it's really the same code. I just got to change it around. In terms of the caption, we'll say invalid data. And over here, we'll say type a number. I could have left it as type a number from 1 to 20. That would have been perfectly acceptable. In this case, I'm just simply trying to communicate you didn't type a number. You must have typed in something else. So this message box will remind them what they need to do. Next, what I'll do is I'll simply get rid of the input in the text boxes. So I'll do something like this. txt num of rows dot text. We'll make that blank. txt num of columns. We will also make that text property blank. And then we don't want to continue with the program, so we'll say exit sub. So what this does is it stops the user from continuing with the program because of an invalid input. All right, let me run the program. Let's see what happens here. So I'll put in the letter Q over here and the letter S over here. Submit invalid data, type a number, click OK. Notice how now that the letters have been erased. So if I try -5, and I'll leave this one blank. Let's see what happens. Well, invalid data, type a number, because I left this thing blank. Click OK. How about -4 and -8, say for example. Out of range, type a number from 1 to 20. So I click that, and I need to type in a number, say for example 5. Well, that works, but I forgot to type in a number over here that's within 1 to 20. So I got to put a number into here. Let's say 8 by 8. Submit. Okay, nothing happens, but at least my data is correct. Okay. Save your work. So now we have good user input checking to make sure that the user is not entering any inappropriate values. And so now we're ready to display those stars. So we'll go to the calculation section. And what I want to do is I want to keep on repeating for every row. I'm going to have a column, right? So check this out. I have row 1, the first star, second star, third star, fourth star, fifth star, however many stars that the user wants. Then we go to the second row, do the same thing, and then the third row, do the same thing, so forth and so on. Notice that I've created counters, right? Counter rows, counter column. All right, so counter rows, we're going to set that to 0. Now, while the counter rows is less than, all right, so the user entered some numbers for us, right? Number of rows, we got that from the user. So while this thing is less than the number of rows, then we're going to do this. All right, let's think about this. We're going to go to the track, we're going to have a track and field match. We're going to run a mile, which means 4 times around the track. So the number of rows, you could think of this as the number of laps. So the number of laps that we've got to run is 4. We are at the beginning of our race, so you're holding a counter in your hand that is set to 0. See? Set to 0. Ready, go. So in this case, you would loop 1, 2, 3, 4 times around. Now, remember, you're starting your counter rows at 0. This is the number 4. You have to run 4 laps. Okay, so the first time around, that's 1 lap. So that's going to be 0. The second time is 1. The next time is 2. And the next time is 3. So I ran 4 laps, as you can see. But this is going to end up being the number 3. Is 3 less than number of rows? Yes, it is. But 4 is not. So you will not run a 5th lap. Remember, in other words, we're starting from 0. Okay. Now, while that's the case, then we'll say counter columns. We'll start that at 0. While counter columns is less than num of columns. While that's true, we're going to do this. So in other words, this is a loop inside of the loop. It's as if, see my cursor right here? So this is the outer track that we're running, but then we have this little inner loop that we go through, and then we go back to an outer loop, and then an inner loop again, then an outer loop, and so forth and so on, right? This inner loop is this guy right here, this little inner loop, and then this outer loop is this one over here, the counter columns less than number of columns. All right, so first of all, within this first row, I'm going to display a bunch of stars. Well, we have an output string, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate that with the output string, whatever that happens to be, and I'll concatenate that with a star, like this. Don't forget that within a while statement, you also have to increment the counter so that it knows that it's supposed to increase by 1. It would be as if you are racing around a high school track and you don't have your counter in your hand, and all you're supposed to do is run 4 laps for a mile. And so here you go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're just going to keep on going because you don't have a counter, right? It would be as if I had this situation. So we call this an infinite loop because counter columns is always going to be less than number of columns because we're not changing it. You don't have a counter in your hand. Now let's put that counter in your hand. So every lap I'm supposed to increase it by 1, and then I keep on doing this until this is no longer true, until counter columns is no longer less than number of columns. Okay. So what this guy does is it displays a list of stars for 1 row. Now, when we're finished with that one row, I think you already realize you got to go to the beginning of the next row after you've done this. So on this end while, we're going to say output is going to be whatever the old output is, and we're going to concatenate that with VB new line. So what this does is it says after you've drawn all of your stars for this 1 row, when you're done, now go to the beginning of the next line. So we're finished with this 1 row. Let's go to the beginning of the next row. So what we're going to do is we're going to say counter rows and increment that by 1. So that's going to be assigned counter rows plus 1. So now this guy over here is going to increase by 1. We reset the counter columns. We do this all over again. So here's the behavior. Follow my cursor. So first, we're going to deal with the first row, and then column 1, column 2, column 3, however many columns we deal with. We go to the beginning of the next line. We increment the rows, go back out, and then take care of, for this next row, all of the columns. And then we go to the beginning of the next row. And then we keep on doing this until we have however many rows and columns that we're supposed to display. So the behavior is outer and then inner, and then outer and then inner. So that's why we call this a nested loop. This loop is nested inside of this loop. Now I live in Huntington Beach, and we have chicken hawks in Huntington Beach. And I've never seen a chicken hawk nest before. A friend pointed it out. These things are huge. They're like these big cones, maybe about 3 feet tall, and inside, the nest for the chicken hawk. And this was something really interesting. I looked inside after the chicken hawk obviously left months later. I looked inside and I saw a hummingbird nest in there. It was a nest inside of a nest. That's what this is. So we called this nested loop, something inside of something else. Okay. Well, now that we're finished, let's go ahead and display the output. So LBL, result.text, is going to be whatever the string output is. Save my work, run the program. You can see the code over here. So let's see, I want 4 rows and 6 columns. Let's see here. First of all, 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, how about, is this 6 columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, it is. Let me change it. How about 15 rows and 2 columns? Okay, so 15 rows, look at that. Looks like I don't have a tall enough display for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like I can only display 11 So I'm probably have to change my program to limit the user to anything up to 11. So let me stop my program, and I'm going to go back over here, and let's limit the number of rows to 11. So over here, let's see here, if the number of rows is less than or if it's greater than 11. I'm going to change that right there. Type a number from 1 to 11. I didn't know that until I ran the program. Let me try it again. Again, you can see the code over here. Number of rows, and let's say 5 number of columns. Actually, number of rows 11, and 5 columns. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 rows. Good. And then columns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. So you can draw any combination within there. We already know that our error checking works. For example, if I type in A over here, it's going to give me a message box. If I type in something crazy over here, again, the message box. So I can only type in numbers within that valid range. And it'll display the number of rows and the number of columns. The way that I was able to achieve that is with our nested loop. All right, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.